are these people?
Look into the gaslight because the U.S. makes clear that its attempt is to weaken Russia, which of course we knew. Okay, but Joe Loria reported this week on Consortium News that the U.S. makes plain its plan to not just win its proxy war, but to continue flooding the country with weapon systems and ammunition long enough to weaken Russia. That's really the whole goal in this whole thing. Look at this with the Nazi symbols right there. Okay, they gave a bit more of its ultimate goals in saying that it aims to weaken Russia. We want to see Russia weakened to the degree that it cannot do the kind of things that it's done in invading Ukraine. Lloyd Austin said in a press conference, right? It's already lost a lot of military capability, a lot of its troops. So basically, we're using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder to drain Russian resources and Russian military equipment and destroy them by proxy. Okay?
Yep.
So that when it comes to Russia's war aims, they're failing. Ukraine is succeeding. I completely disagree with that assessment, but that's just wishful thinking and gaslighting and lying to people that
well,
don't know otherwise.
they have to maintain the facade that Ukraine is winning because they have to manufacture consent for the American populace to get behind the war, which they would never get behind the war if they were honest and say Ukraine has no chance. So that's the reason they maintain it. It's all about maintaining popular positivity about what's going on over there. But anybody with half a brain knows that Ukraine is just getting hung out to dry, and it's going to be like what people have been saying. I think Chris Hedges was talking about. It's like they're just going to fight to the last Ukrainian, and the United States is fine watching the last Ukrainian die in this war that is designed to not only bleed Russia, but mark my words, it's also for bleeding China. Because China and Russia are getting too close. So the ultimate goal is weakening those two countries who are now much closer because of what NATO has been doing lately.
Well, and again, what they're trying to do, again, a sovereign, independent Ukraine will be around a lot longer than Putin is on the scene. Well, maybe, except that there would be one if you actually gave up the Donbass region and allowed them to become sovereign and independent for themselves and allowed the rest of Ukraine to govern themselves and to become independent. But the Nazis don't want to allow that to happen. So the Azov battalion is the problem. What happened was on February 23rd or 24th, and again, very few people ever mention this, but Putin acknowledged the independent states per the Minsk Accords of Donetsk and Luhansk. And once they started asking him for aid as independent nations, that's when he offered support. And that's when he offered, and he said, look, they said they've been bombing us, and now that we're an independent country, can we get some help from somebody, because the West isn't going to help us. So I get what's happening here, and again, we are anti-war. We don't want to see any of this happening. But this is facilitated, again, by NATO, by the West, by wanting to sell weapons into Germany, into Ukraine, into Poland, into everywhere that becomes a NATO member state, right? I believe that's even part of becoming NATO is access to the NATO weaponry and to the purchasers of NATO weaponry.
Yep. And Hillary Clinton came out on MSNBC twice and admitted that this is the Afghan option, which is, we've seen this before, guys. The Soviets got pulled into Afghanistan back in the day for this exact same thing. And Hillary Clinton didn't mince words. She was obvious about it. And the first time she was on MSNBC, she was talking about how this was the Afghan option. Second time she went on there and was advocating for arming the Ukrainians, like, outwardly. So they're not hiding it. They know exactly what they want to create a quagmire. Yeah, right. They want to create a quagmire. They want to bleed Russia, and they're not even hiding it. And by the way, Consortium News, they also just got removed from PayPal. I don't know if you guys saw this morning.
Yes, they did.
Joe Loria does great work, and that's exactly why they're getting these people, because Joe Loria and Consortium News do fantastic work. There's a good way to tell if somebody's doing work that is good right now. Chances are they're being smeared or taken off of PayPal or both.
Yep. So again, Russia says it never had any intention of taking down the capital, only had parked forces outside the city as a diversion to pin down Ukrainian forces while Russia fought to gain control of Mariupol in the south. Okay, and it says that it withdrew its troops from near Kiev to join the battle for Donbass. So again, Lloyd Austin did not spell out how the U.S. would achieve their goal of weakening Russia's capability to very quickly reproduce that military capability without a direct military confrontation with Russia. And that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, and see, the thing is the point is not to defeat it's not
week,
the
right?
point is not to defeat Russia. The point is not to lose and also not to win. The point is to keep it perpetual.
Right, and bleed and
Yes.
to bleed Russia slowly, because we know that our resources outweigh theirs vastly, and that in time they'll end up starving out. The problem is, again, all the innocent people, innocent citizens of both Russia and Ukraine who end up suffering in this war, as well as the rest of the innocent civilians around the world who are having inflation and supply chain and all kinds of other issues that are half manufactured and half caused as a result of what's going on here. I mean, it's absolutely,
and the backfire effect is that Russia and China are better at waging economic war than we are, because they can actually think a couple of steps ahead, and we're kind of a blunt object when it comes to that stuff. So what they've done, Russia and China, is they've capitalized on a lot of countries' disdain for the United States treatment of them over the last 20 or 30 years, and basically welcomed them with open arms. So now you're seeing, like, even Saudi Arabia, who is now not taking Biden's phone calls, because we get a lot of our, oil from Saudi Arabia, right? Now Saudi Arabia is considering selling oil to the Chinese in yuan. And we're seeing a lot of these other countries like India that are basically like, yeah, we have no problem dealing with Russia and paying them in rubles for our enormous amount of oil that we get from Russia. We're just going to say, screw the U.S., because the U.S. has never treated us well and always treats us like a sort of slave colony. We're going to basically just work with Russia. So what the United States has effectively done economically is they've made a bunch of enemies over the past decades and half century. But then they wage sanctions on Russia, and Russia and China work together to just bring all of these enemies of the United States in economically. So we're seeing like geopolitical restructuring happening before our eyes. And while we may still outdo China and Russia militarily, they are gaining much more influence economically. And that's how they're going to beat us eventually, because of course
they're getting out of the ISS because of sanctions now too.
Yep, you're going to see. Just wait till you see what happens, because I covered this. Poland and Bulgaria have refused to pay for oil in rubles now, right? Poland's going to be all right because they still can trade a little bit elsewhere. They can get other stuff, but Bulgaria is going to have a real hard time. And you know what you're going to see in about 6 months? Bulgaria is going to become a martyr that other countries look at and go, oh shit, we don't want to do that. we don't want to do what Bulgaria just did. So we're going to go. So the people of these countries are going to be, and even the governments of these countries are going to be like, yeah, we should probably just make a deal with Russia and China before they fuck us economically.
Yeah. Here, the fact that the U.S. needed the invasion to launch its economic and information warfare against Russia. It got that invasion by dismissing their treaty proposals to remove NATO troops and missiles from Eastern Europe, even though Russia threatened war. The U.S. ignored the Minsk Accords to resolve the civil war in Donbass. Again, I just covered that. Prolonging the war as long as possible, as Anthony Blinken said 10 days ago, it would last at least till the end of this year, is part of a trap that the U.S. set for Russia, as you said, Rob, similar to the one that Carter set for in Afghanistan. They want to bleed them dry and give them their own Vietnam and gain resources and keep sending troops and resources till they're running out of money. And it's really disgusting and aggravating. And 33 billion more. Thanks a lot. Daryl, our INN brother, had a great tweet today that Biden found 20 billion to end homelessness. The problem was he found another 13 billion on top of it, and he sent all that money to Ukraine instead.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Fucking fire, man. Love that dude. Shout out to Daryl. Love you, man. Hope you come out on Friday.